Welcome, everybody, back on another episode of the Scouting Combine. Scouting the Fins, actually. We're going to be talking about the Scouting Combine on today's show. Thank you guys for joining us on the 3 Yards Per Carry podcast. This show is brought to you by ThompsonCigar.com. Use promo code 3yards20 for 20% off your order of $75 or more. That's 3yards20 on ThompsonCigar.com. As always, our co-host Eric and Coach Smith. Gentlemen, how are we doing today?
Doing well. Excited to talk about the combine. A lot of really intriguing prospects on the docket today. So excited to pick your guys' brains about what you think.
Yeah, definitely. It's a fun time of year. Coming out of the scouting combine, kind of on the eve of free agency. Not literally, but we're getting really close to that time. So a lot of stuff that we can talk about in terms of how this is going to set up heading into free agency and the draft for the Dolphins.
I really love this time of the year, especially in the off season, because we kind of get to see what the strategy is behind the 31 other NFL teams and specifically about the Miami Dolphins. Some news we should touch up upon before we start talking about, some of the prospects at the scouting combine that did well, who could be targets for the Dolphins as we shift into gear to our NFL draft series. The big news for the Dolphins was Bradley Chubb amending his contract. That is a very, very big deal where the Dolphins have more cash in their salary cap to spend for this year. I do think they may have some other restructures as well. Teron Armstead took it like a champ and is going to be playing on the vet minimum. So the Dolphins are around about $27 million above the cap. They could make some more moves to gain some flexibility. And they also did not tender Quentin Bell, their outside linebacker. Now that, they believe Bradley Chubb will come back, Jalen Phillips should be healthy, and Chop Robinson having a great rookie season last year. And then some of the other guys like Grayson Murphy and Mo Kamara in the wings waiting. So they have a pretty good crop of edge rushers, outside linebackers, bearing injury, God forbid.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where you look at it and you say to yourself, the Dolphins could have, and I hate to do this, but in a perfect world, where they stay healthy, you're looking at a pass rush ideally that could rival the likes of what we saw with the Eagles last season. And I don't say that lightly, but I'm looking at a guy in Chop Robinson who I think is likely to be a double-digit sack guy as early as next year. Jalen Phillips, we've seen it. Bradley Chubb, obviously, is coming off the injury, so we'll have to see exactly how formidable he is post-injury. But we've seen it with him. We've seen Zach Sealer be a double-digit sack guy up the middle. The pass rush, if healthy, and I know you can't build your team around it, if healthy, can be really, really formidable. I'm encouraged by the group. I'd like to see just one more piece added for depth. Doesn't have to be a top line player, but just one more guy for solid depth. But I think they're almost set with their pass rush.
Yeah, I agree with that. You're talking about Chubb specifically. The Dolphins really aren't in a position to create additional holes on the team, but at the same time, they were in a position where it would have been irresponsible to, have a player that didn't play at all last year on a $30 million cap hit for 2025. I kind of hope that they would, lower that number. My thought was that they would come out and say, like, hey, you can go out on the open market and get $8 million. We'll give you $10 million and kind of get $10 million in cap savings. But what the Dolphins ended up doing by almost taking him down to the vet minimum for his base salary, they've cleared up even more space with that. And if he doesn't pan out this year, there's no additional money lost than what they have right now. But if he does, show up and, is that 10, 12 sack guy that we're hoping for him to be, then it costs more money in 2026. But that's a lot easier to take, when you're paying for a player that is producing than, just paying for a player that you hope produces. So I like the move a lot from the Dolphins' perspective and from Bradley Chubb's perspective. This contract allows him the opportunity to try to earn the money that the Dolphins originally allocated for him. It's not just, cutting the money and saying, hey, you're making less money. It's giving the opportunity a true prove it deal that gives him the opportunity to earn, the same amount that he would have made with the contract as is.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And the other thing that kind of makes it interesting is I think, even going back to as far as a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, when having the conversations about what positions will the Dolphins be targeting early on in the draft, you couldn't really rule out edge rusher because of the fact that there was so much up in the air with Bradley Chubb. And obviously Jalen Phillips' injury history and Chubb's injury history. It's not to say that you're loaded there, but I think you're looking at a position group there at edge where you can say, well, you probably don't want to allocate first round capital to edge rusher at this point, now that Chubb is going to be signed up in 2025. And so I think that that's actually a pretty good segue here into the types of players along the defensive line the Dolphins could be targeting in the draft. Not necessarily in the first round with the guy that we're about to talk about, but I think much in the mold of a guy like CJ West out of Indiana, who had himself just a fantastic combine. I mean, probably lost a few pounds to run sub 5 at 316. He played a little bit closer to 330 at Indiana last year. But really impressive stuff, especially that 33-inch vert at 300 plus. That's just insane explosion for a guy of that size. Really like what he brings to the table. Just a couple of the things that I noticed about him was I like prospects that you can see a progression on. You saw him at Kent State perform really well, and then you saw him step up in competition, and he didn't skip a beat. And that usually bodes well for the NFL transition as well. So curious about your thoughts on CJ West here out of Indiana, guys.
Well, looking at his Indiana film, he primarily lined up inside the guards, like from a 2-eye and a 3-tech, and sometimes even as the nose. With his body type at 6'2", 317, he was a little bit inconsistent off of the snap and off of the ball. But when he does come off of it, he's able to impact opposing offensive linemen. He's able to knock them back. He jabs them with on their chest, especially when he's in that kickstand type of technique. Coach, when you're coaching up against, opposing defensive linemen, when they're using the kickstand technique, where they have the hand in the ground and they just pop right off the ball, they're already trying to push, and they're trying to push back the opposing offensive lineman. CJ West does a really good job of that, specifically in run support, and he's able to create havoc in the backfield. But there's a lot left to be desired, specifically as a pass rusher. I mean, we take a look at that clip up against Michigan, Eric. I don't know if you're able to play it back, but just the technique from there, just the pop of him going up against the offensive lineman. Like, he doesn't blow right off the line of scrimmage, but he's able to use his hands and his feet to get around the offensive lineman and wrap up the tackler in the backfield. And that's one specific key for Anthony Weaver's defense to be good up against the run. They need to get into the backfield. And with a guy like CJ West, if you are, using him in specific third or second down pass rush snaps, he could double team and help out Zach Sealer to stunt inside. He could help guys like Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips, Chop Robinson stunt inside. as he eats up those blocks. He could be that defensive tackle, defensive lineman that doesn't have that type of production, but helps out other guys. And that's key, especially with this current Miami Dolphins edge group.
Yeah, I think that he is a. We talk about some of the other tackles, especially high in this draft. Some of those guys are guys that can play from a zero technique over the center all the way out to a five technique over the tackle. And, with the limited length that West has, like you said, I think that he is going to be one of those guys that is more limited to the interior of the defensive line. But Anthony Weaver and the Baltimore defense that we saw certainly has a role for guys like that. We saw Benito Jones playing in that type of role. CJ West is a more athletic player than what Benito Jones is. I mean, one of the notes that I have in my notes for West is, a dancing bear in terms of just being light on his feet. Like, this guy doesn't look like a 320, 330 pound guy when he's moving around. Like Kassam said, there's more in the tank for him. There's times that when he's not the primary guy on a stunt, like when he's the guy that's setting somebody else up, like he does the job, he will, take a lineman with him, but he's not really looking to press himself back into the play. So I think there's, more opportunities there for him to finish the play when he's not the primary target of the stunt defensively. When he gets into those one-on-one pass rush situation, he shows that potential. I mean, he does really well with his hands, gets rid of blocks, shows the explosion, just doesn't show it consistently enough. So if you bring him in and he is a 300-400 snap type guy where you're not asking to be out there every play, and he's got to prove that he deserves to be out there. The guys that we've talked about already, the Chubbs, the Chops, the Phillips, there's going to be those opportunities for somebody on the interior to have one-on-one situations. And that's the type of place that a CJ West could really excel.
Yeah, I think one point where he can actually improve upon, and this comes with playing experience, off season, and trading as well. Just really improving his anchor and his lower body, just matching his aggressiveness with his hands and his upper abdomen, and just having that play strength on his lower abdomen and his legs to really anchor down, settle down, and push back a little bit more, especially up against the pass. Like if he's able to develop some tools, and defensive line coach Austin Clark has done a fantastic job with guys along the interior and the edge on how they're able to mirror their hands and their feet. And I think if the Dolphins were able to pick him on early day 3 or late day 3, I think this is one of those developmental guys that we can see become a mainstay for the Dolphins, because like his development trajectory, at least what I can see within the next 2 to 3 years, will be NFL starter like.
Yeah, I think you can definitely see that with the athletic traits that he has, because for a guy at his size, watching him play, it's actually not all that surprising that he ran as well as he did, because you see the speed on film with the way that he's able to move. I think he is a guy that would benefit greatly. Any interior defensive lineman that the Dolphins draft would benefit greatly. And this is where I am going to ask, beg, plead for one more season out of Calais Campbell. Please, it would be so good for the interior defensive line room, especially for the younger players that they, whichever young player they do select in this year's draft. But I do want to segue over from a guy who was probably a day 3 pick to a guy who has firmly cemented himself as a first rounder, I think we can say at this point, and that is South Carolina safety Nick Emenwari. You want to talk about a guy that's just a top 1% athlete at 6'2", 220 plus, a 4.3 40, 43-inch vert. I mean, he repped out more on the bench than some linebacker prospects did this year. Just freakish stuff from the guy from South Carolina, and it shows. You look at some of the things that he's able to do I mean, you watch him in some of these contested ball situations in the red zone, and he's mossing receivers. I look at him and I see Anthony Weaver's. I see Kyle Hamilton a little bit, because I look at a guy that's that big safety, except he runs a 4.3 instead of a 4.59. Now that's not to say he's going to be an All-Pro, because Kyle Hamilton with 4.3 speed would be an All-Pro. There are certainly things in his game he has to clean up. But I think Emin would be a tremendous addition to this defense. Freakish athlete, pretty solid in coverage, and just physical as heck.
Yeah, I think the only bad thing going for Nick Warrior was the fact that he did not gain enough attention because he played for a team like South Carolina. And look, the Gamecocks, man, that defense has some dudes on there. They have really, really great athletes, really, really great prospects, but just overall, I just don't think the defense really put it together. Like, they were greater. They were not greater than the sum of their parts. But we talk about Kyle Kennard, their edge rusher, Nick Warrior as well. I was talking about Warrior for a while, and I had him over Malachi Starks as my safety one when we were discussing this in our OnlyFins Discord, which, by the way, if you want the entire access, premium vetted information that comes from us, $4.99 a month. Check it out on Discord, OnlyFins. You can check out the link below the video. He's a ball hawk. He's a stud. Really, really fast. And a lot of people are comparing him to Kyle Hamilton, which honestly is a pretty good comparison just based off of his size and his play style. He can play the nickel. He can play in the box. He can play deep as well. Specifically on, inside the pass game, he's able to diagnose and trigger on routes breaking in front of him, and he's able to undercut those throwing lanes. He's able to deflect those passes. He's reading the quarterback's eyes. In this Anthony Weaver defense, they play a lot of, cover 3, cover 6, reading the quarterback's eyes as well. He's able to anticipate those routes, anticipate the throws, contend for jump balls as well. But I think just because of his size, there's a little bit of hip tightness for him where he's not able to quickly flip on a dime where we see some other guys that are 5'11" or 6 foot. It just comes with the body. It comes with the build. He just needs to be a little bit better over the top on the deep routes. But I think his impact is much better when he's playing downhill, coming in the box, running at full speed. He's able to fit the run, as we saw in that play there up against Georgia State. He has that closing speed. His 10-yard split was 1.49, which was really, really fast. If you take a look at the next-gen stats for his combine numbers, he absolutely blew everything in a way, and his relative athletic score was, I think, a 9.89 out of 10, which is absolutely elite athleticism. Tight ends do tend to struggle against him, which we do know that the Dolphins have had their issues covering and trying to block opposing tight ends. If this is one of these guys, which Miami takes with the 13th overall pick, this is a home run pick, in my opinion. He checks all the boxes that you want out of a defensive back in this scheme. He can play downhill. He can cover. And you got to think, Chris Greer's son was in Chris Greer's ear talking about Cam Smith. Chris Greer's son plays with Nick Warrior. You got to think there might be a little bit of favoritism right there. And Chris Greer may be salivating to get him. And I think myself and most Dolphins fans would be perfectly fine with this pick and some will be even elated like myself if the Dolphins were to draft him.
I'm not sure that Chris Greer's son's opinion on defensive backs is one that fans are going to be too excited about, considering how the Cam Smith experience has gone so far. But I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I don't have Eman quite as high as you do, Hassam. I still have Starks ahead of him on my board. He's a guy that obviously has the things that you can't teach in terms of his size and his speed and his quickness. I do think that he is a player that is, better in a straight line than, moving horizontally. Uh, I think that he does a really good job of once he sees something, being able to trigger and attack it. I think that one place that, I'd like to see him continue to develop is, a little more of the reading of it in the anticipation of it. I think when he sees something in the passing game, he triggers, he gets there, and he's aggressive, playing the ball. And same thing in the run game. Like once he sees it, he's a missile getting there and blowing up the play. It's just that, sometimes I feel like he is a step slow. So I think that, if you're drafting a guy like this in the top 15, a lot of it comes down to those physical traits for me, and the hope that you can continue to develop some of the more instinctual stuff. But I think the comparison for me, because I do feel that Kyle Hamilton has those, the reading skills, the play diagnosing skills that we need to see grow from Eman. The comparison that I would have for Eman is more of a guy that is almost a tweener, right? Not big enough to be a linebacker, but maybe not the side to side change of direction quickness that you like to see out of the safeties in coverage. So my comparison would be Isaiah Simmons, the kind of guy that came out with almost not a position, but thankfully with this Anthony Weaver type defense, you get a lot of three safety sets where you can have a safety who is almost a hybrid linebacker safety guy, and there is certainly still a role for him in this system.
Yeah, the one thing that I will say about Eman is I think depending on what happens in free agency and depending on if the Dolphins do sign a safety, the type of safety that the Dolphins sign, whether or not they go out and they get a guy that's a little bit of that bigger body that plays more in the box, or whether they go and get a guy that's a little bit more of that center fielder.
Or whether if Jordan Poyer resigns.
No, don't even put that out there. I think that can be a little bit of a tell as to whether or not Eman is a guy at 13 to watch for, because I do think that if he's put in the right role immediately, he can be worthy of that pick. It's just a matter of making sure that they're asking him to do the right things on the defensive side of the football. But moving on to the next guy here, who is another really, really athletic player, maybe a little same-ish with some of the guys that you have on defense, and I think we're going to get into that a little bit here, and that is Alabama's Jihad Campbell. Really good athlete at 6'3", 235. I know Eman kind of makes that 450, 240 look a little pedestrian, but that is really good at his size for a linebacker. Highly productive player at Alabama last year. My concern with Campbell is I don't know if he sticks at off-ball linebacker. I think at the pro level, he almost becomes more of a Chop Robinson type player. Not necessarily in function, but more so in role, in that I think he would be more of a pass rusher full-time than off-ball linebacker. You can play him there, and he's got pretty good coverage skills, but he's a little slow when it comes to reading the play and diagnosis. So that's where I kind of struggle with Campbell, because I would really, if the Dolphins are drafting a linebacker, I would want that off-ball guy that can really pair nicely with Jordan Brooks. But what do you guys think about Campbell here as it pertains to this Dolphins defense and what he would bring?
I think that, with his size, 6'3", 235, and that speed, he's the prototypical linebacker. And he's drawing a lot of Fred Warner type of comparisons because of his coverage skills, of him able to diagnose in zone. He's a converted edge. You got to think about that, Eric. So obviously, it might be a little bit slow from what we've seen, but he did convert after a year and a half to 2 years. And it's advanced if you take a look at the context of his conversion. If you take a look at his interception up against Georgia, it showed exceptional route recognition from that zone drop. I will agree, he is a fantastic blitzer. And with this Dolphins defense, you are going to have linebackers that will blitz. We saw it with Tyrell Dodson. We saw it with Jordan Brooks as well. He's a very dynamic defender, and he showcased that a lot. Yeah, see, just like that pick right there. That zone recognition, absolutely perfect. That is what you want from your linebacker in this scheme. His playmaking ceiling can be through the roof. He's one of the youngest linebackers in this class, one of the youngest defenders in this class. I think he'll be 20 by the time the draft rolls around. He's got perfectly timed A-gap pressures, explosive range up against screens. He's got the athleticism to match up in coverage. There is a little bit of struggle for him when linemen get very close to him and square him up. So he needs to get better in slipping blocks and closing the space, so that way he can be a constant threat in the backfield and along the horizontal areas of the line of scrimmage. He acts like a veteran in very crucial and clutch moments. He's got to develop a little bit more with his hands stacking and shedding up against run blocks, but he's young. He's 20. And if you pair him up with a guy like Jordan Brooks, he's going to learn a lot from him. And the Dolphins really like to use two inside linebackers in this scheme. And you can pair a guy like Jordan Brooks with him. You can pair a guy like Tyrell Dodson with him. But he will be your future linebacker one for the foreseeable future if you draft him at number 13. And you're able to do a lot of things on this defense with a guy like Jod Campbell and Jordan Brooks right next to each other. The coverage becomes much better on the back end. You have another threat of a blitzer, a looper, another guy that can, rush the passer, along with the likes of Bradley Chubb, Chop Robinson, Zach Sealer, and so on and so forth. He opens up a lot of things for the defense on the second level, and you have multiple threats along different levels of the defense. And I think that's the next iteration of Anthony Weaver's defense here in Miami.
Yeah, so, in this defense, we want to find guys that can not just do multiple things, but do multiple things well. And that's what you have with Campbell. I mean, I think it was Eric that had said about the, little slow on the trigger, but we again, similar to Eman Ward, when he pulls that trigger, he is, a missile running downhill and blowing up plays. And he's fairly new to the position. So again, a little bit of a projection there that you expect that to continue to develop. But when you look at the athleticism and coverage, you look at the edge rushing ability that he brings. Hassan pointed out that his ability to time up those interior blitzes. This is a guy that if you have Jordan Brooks playing more of your traditional linebacker role, this is more of a wild card guy that you can move around the defense and that you don't have to just, line him up at off-ball linebacker and let offensive run schemes know where he is. You can move him around pre-snap and create mismatches. So, this is a player that I think, could really, like you said, evolve the defense, be the next evolution in terms of, you can't just line up and know where these guys are going to be the way that you can with Anthony Walker, for example, was an off-ball linebacker. You're not going to find him lining up on the edge and, running off the edge. So, we moved to next year. If we get somebody like Campbell that, can do all of that stuff off ball, but then, as the quarterback's going through and setting his protections, next thing you know, Campbell is moving up to the edge, and he's not just a guy standing on the edge. He's a guy that can legitimately win against NFL offensive tackles off the edge. So I think that would be a very fun change up to add to the defense.
Oh, you're muted, Eric.
Yeah, I just realized. I agree when it comes to Campbell. I didn't realize, that he was going to be just 20 at the time of the draft. So that obviously, I think, changes the calculations a little bit in terms of things like play recognition, because that is something that, does tend to get better as guys get more experienced. Again, I wouldn't be opposed to it with Campbell at 13, because I think right now the priority should be adding as many versatile playmakers to that second level of the defense as possible. Currently at 13, if I had to choose a number one priority, and I think he certainly checks off that box.
Yeah. All right. As we head to break, we are done with the defensive portion of it, and we'll get to the offensive playmakers and maybe even a couple of offensive tackles for coach that he really likes. All right, folks, this basketball season, when your favorite stars score buckets, we're alley-ooping you an opportunity to win money from watching sports with Underdog. Underdog is one of the leading sports apps, and you can play now in your state. To play, choose whether a player will go higher or lower on one of their stats, on points, assists, rebounds, and more. They've got all your favorite leagues, teams, and stars to choose from. Great entries with all basketball picks, or mix and match across other sports. You can play with as little as $1, and if you get everything right, you can win up to 1,000 times your money. So turn $1 into $1,000 just with your hoops knowledge. If you don't necessarily have enough basketball knowledge and you're more of a hockey guy, the Florida Panthers just got Brad Marchand from the Boston Bruins, and it looks like the Panthers are completely owning the city of Boston, and South Florida is owning the city of Boston. So watch out for what it can be for Brad Marchand, Sam Bennett, and the rest of the Florida Panthers. Download the Underdog app and sign up now using the promo code 3yards to unlock a special offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you make your first deposit. Join in on the fun when you sign up with promo code 3yards. Claim your special offer today and get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly upon first deposit. Higher or lower, you make the call on Underdog.
Be 18 plus, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 19 plus in Alabama, New England, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP, 1-800-639-8783, or text NEXT-STEP to 53342. In New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE NY or text Hope NY to 467-369. Must be.
And we are back. I think that was a good crop of defensive players we talked about.
I agree. It's a really athletic class this year on both sides of the ball, really. And we're actually about to get into arguably the most athletic position in the draft period this year currently. And that is going to be the running back position. And we're going to start with Vachel Tutin out of Virginia Tech, 5'9", 206, ran 4.32. Crazy when you think that he was about 20 some odd pounds heavier than Devon Achane at the combine, at least when Achane ran 4.32 and he ran the exact same number. I look at Vachel Tutin, and I think it's really hard not to see some of the Maurice Jones-Drew comparisons when you look at a guy that's almost the exact same stature, really powerful runner. He's a good blocker and pass protection. Two knocks though. Number one, you didn't get to see a lot of opportunities in the pass game for Tootin in either of his years at Virginia Tech. And number two, he does have a tendency to get stopped up in those short yardage situations, which I know is going to get stuck in the craw of Dolphins fans everywhere if he is the pick. But I do think that he does add a little bit of that power element that people have been clamoring for, that I think Mike McDaniel has signaled that he's clamoring for in his comments, stating that the room is incomplete to this point. But enough of that from me. I want to hear what you guys think about Bashal Tootin out of Virginia Tech.
Well, the numbers tell one story, but the tape shows a running back who got better every single year. He returned kicks as a freshman out of A&T, and then a complete workhorse back at Virginia Tech in the ACC. If we're talking about the short yardage issues, it's almost the same issues that the Dolphins have with their skill players and their offensive linemen not anchoring well enough, not getting to their blocks properly. And I don't necessarily think that's a knock on Tootin. He's got the size, 5'9", and the body weight to handle short yardage, and he's definitely got the speed as well to take the top off the defense. He's an explosive accelerator, ran the same 40 as Devon Achane. And my comparison for Bashal Tootin was actually Mo Ibrahim out of Minnesota. Now, Mo Ibrahim had a lot of injury issues, but he was a very talented player. Tootin is talented, but doesn't necessarily have the injury issues that Mo Ibrahim did. He runs with outstanding contact balance, consistent forward lean. He falls forward. He gains out those extra yards. He has the patience on those zone reads. He's able to find those blocks inside. And he is actually a dangerous weapon in this screen game. We talk about potentially moving Devon Achane to more of a pass-catching role as the third wide receiver. Bashal Tootin can fill that role with Jalen Wright as the 1-2 running back duo. The only thing for him, and which is also the same thing for Devon Achane, is the pass protection. The technique needs work. But that's also why the Dolphins have Jalen Wright. He's a really good pass protector, is really fast. He's a bruiser. Now, while Tootin has that straight line speed, he doesn't have the elite lateral agility like Jalen Wright and Devon Achane too. A little bit of ball security issues that needs to be worked on. We saw the ball security issues with Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane that killed a couple games, killed a couple drives last season, that just put the nail in the head for the Dolphins. Tootin, if drafted, he definitely needs to work on that. And I think he could be a steal on a late day 2, late day 3 pick. He's got that rare combo of track speed and between the tackles toughness. Coach, do you agree?
So I guess that I don't see Tootin as, quite as much of the power runner that you guys have seen him as. For me, obviously, the running back room is not complete. And the way that you fill out that room is going to depend on the type of player that you're looking for. And I think that there are a lot of similarities between Tootin and Achane and the way that they play. So I feel like if you're trying to find another player that, God forbid something happens to Achane, that you could put somebody in that can still do a lot of the same things. I think that Tootin is that type of player. If you're looking for somebody that's going to be that inside zone bruiser, I think there's other directions that you can go. But Tootin is bigger. We talked about him being about 20 pounds heavier than what HN is. The passing game stuff doesn't concern me a whole lot because when I watched that Virginia Tech passing game, they didn't even look at him. Like there was so many plays that he was open as a check down receiver, and the quarterback just wanted to go 20, 30 yards downfield unnecessarily. Like if you've got a guy that's running a 4.35 or whatever it is, just give him the ball, on the check down and let it happen. This is a guy that is willing to get out there. He's willing to stick his nose in there as a blocker. Go back and watch the Rutgers game. And for like the first quarter and a half a game, he's basically a glorified fullback, being a lead blocker on quarterback runs. They weren't even giving him the ball. And then you get into the second quarter and the second half, and they start handing him the ball, and they almost make a comeback in that game with him scoring 3 touchdowns. Lots of zone runs, lots of outside zone runs, and he really does a nice job of reading that at full speed. And that's something we see, when Achane's at his best, that's the way we see him running too. And same with Jalen Wright, that when they're running that outside zone, they're at full speed, just, little subtle moves that, they're able to take advantage of those blocks and get into that open field, before you know what's happening. So, that's the way I see Tootin, is just a little bigger version of Achan, the type of player that can replace him if something were to happen to Achan, or if you want to have those two guys in the backfield with a very dynamic package where either of them can flex out. That's the way that I see Tootin. But it's definitely, after I saw that simulcast of Tootin and Jahmyr Gibbs and Saquon Barkley run the 40, where Tootin just pulls away from some of the elite backs in the NFL, like he's one of my favorite guys in the draft right now.
Yeah, I think if Mike McDaniel certainly would have no aversions to drafting a Bashal Tootin, especially depending on what happens with a Tyreek Hill. If it does end up that Devon Achane does get more work in the passing game, and you need somebody that can kind of fill in what he does a little bit more in the run game, I can definitely see opportunity for a guy like Tootin. But if you're looking for a guy that's going to add power to this running game, and you're looking for a guy that's going to be a violent runner on those inside zone carries, we've got Quinshon Judkins at 6 foot, 221 out of Ohio State. He loves the contact. And I think the most impressive thing for me, we're talking about a guy who was a freshman in the SEC, ran for 1,500 yards and 16 touchdowns as a freshman in the SEC at Ole Miss. I mean, that's just nuts. And I know that production isn't necessarily always everything at the college level, but you're talking about a guy that has the physical tools to back it up. In Judkins, granted, I think he might be a little rich in terms of draft capital as to where I would draft a running back this year. But if you're looking for a guy that's going to add that power element, I think Judkins is a fantastic add for this Dolphins offense.
Yeah, he definitely invites the contact. He thrives in those short yardage situations. He's able to get skinny through the gaps, and he keeps the legs driving through the contact. He's a natural hands catcher, especially in the screen game. One thing which he does well over Bashal Tootin is the ball security fundamentals. Just 3 fumbles in 800 touches. He keeps that elbow locked. He adjusts the ball position based on defenders angled against the defenders in specific angles. Can work on pass protection as well. Doesn't have that top end speed like Jalen Wright and Devon Achane do in this Dolphins running back room. But one thing that concerned me just a little bit, I know, Eric, you mentioned the production in the SEC, but it actually dipped up against Big Ten competition. He averaged just under 4 yards per carry behind that massive Ohio State offensive line. I think, Coach, I don't know if you agree with this or not, but I feel like he can be too patient at times, which can lead to negative plays sometimes. So he just needs to follow his man, hit the hole with more decisiveness. Well, if that read is not there, just find a hole and go at it.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point you make there because one of the things that I wanted to talk about was a note that I had on him that, a player that he kind of reminds me of, and obviously not to that extreme, but is Le'Veon Bell in that sense that, he almost gets to the line and, starts to dance a little bit and pick and choose before he goes, as opposed to, the type of running backs that the Dolphins tend to like that, are going to get downhill on that outside zone and read it on the run. I mean, you see it on that play there that, we have up right now where, when he can get into a straight line, he's got that straight line speed, but sometimes can be a little too tentative and let it close down. I think that Junkins is the type of player that, if you get him into the right system and, can convince him to be decisive with his runs, I think he could be a really good player. But if you get him into a system that doesn't fit his skills and you ask him to do things that don't fit his skills, I think that he's a player that could easily be looked at as a bust. This isn't an Ashton Genty that you can drop him in any scheme and he's just going to light it up no matter what. I think that if you get him into a running back room that doesn't really work with him on that vision and that dancing behind the line, I think it could be somebody that people just look at as somebody that can't make a decision and can't find a hole. But if you continue to develop that and try to limit when he does that, then the power that he brings is something that a lot of running backs don't have. And it's not just it's not the squatting power, it's the aggressive running. They talk about Pacheco and running like a ball of knives, and that's the same type of player that you get in Judkins. When you talk about just the speed and the aggressiveness that he runs with is more of a factor than just pure strength.
Yeah, I think he would definitely be a really solid addition to the running back room. And one position that I think could go a little under the radar for the Dolphins this year is wide receiver, and that's where a guy like Chimere Dike out of the University of Florida is really interesting. A guy that the numbers in terms of production don't jump out at you, but athletically the guy is a burner. And number two, he runs a 4.34, but it is an extremely easy 4.34 for him. I mean, you watch him on film and he just glides when he's running. Granted, he does have some issues, with drops, as a lot of these guys that are more of the vertical field stretchers tend to. But the thing that when I was watching Chimere Dike, I kept the thought in my mind kept popping up. What if Robbie Anderson worked out for the Miami Dolphins? What if Robbie Anderson worked out? Because I think that's almost exactly what he would be able to bring to this Dolphins offense. And it's a player that I think you could be excited about in the later rounds on day 3 as a 5th, 6th round pick. And I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on some of the things that Chimere Dike could bring to this Dolphins offense.
I don't agree with your thoughts about the drops. I think it's just more so like he's got good hands, but I think it's just the security of it where he can sometimes be a body catcher like Jalen Waddle. Jalen Waddle had those issues at Alabama and starting off with the Dolphins where he would catch with his body rather than his hands, and he improved on that the last 2 seasons. that can obviously be coached through. We saw it with Jalen Waddle. Chamiri Dyke can also improve on that as well. He's really good at finding those soft spots and working himself open on the short, intermediate, and deep as well. He brings a lot of special teams value, which is an added bonus because of his speed. And his speed shows up on tape. It's actually functional speed that you see on inbreakers, on outs, in screens, and just going up against defensive backs. Like we're seeing it right there. He used to play out Wisconsin as well. We saw him breaking away from a couple of Northwestern defensive backs. If you watch his game up against Tennessee, where he set up the game-tying score with a clutch 27-yard return, I think this allows him to be that special teams guy, which we expected out of Braxton Berrios, and allows Malik Washington to get involved in the passing game much, much more. I think he will thrive in this Dolphin system because the motions that the Dolphins use with receivers and running backs, it's able to create those free releases. And if you do that in the quick passing games, those dump offs, those screens, the flats on the routes, he's able to adjust on the fly. He's got lateral agility. He's got elite quickness in the short and intermediate range as well. He's able to affect defenders' angles and get yards after the catch. The only thing that concerns me is about his lean frame and about the hits that he may take at the NFL level.
For me, his lateral agility doesn't show up on the field as much as I would like. The numbers are certainly there, but when I watch him on the field, it's a lot more straight line stuff for me, is what I see, compared to a Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle that can, catch the ball in the middle of the field and just, make a guy miss in a phone booth type deal. But there's plenty of other things that he does offer. Like I said, the straight line speed stuff. When you look at a guy of his stature and speed, you typically think of a wide receiver that shies away from contact, and DK does not. Like he is after it in the run game. I really like him as not a slot type of player, like not somebody that would compete with a Malik Washington for a run 5 yards and 2
Yeah,
way
like
go
he can
type
be on
deal.
the boundary as well.
Right. But I like him as a guy that, if we're going to continue with Tyreek and we want to continue with these smaller, faster guys that can run those digs and those type of routes, then I think that, DK would be the type of player that can spell those guys. And,
Yeah, like
you talked
can be
about
on the
the
mesh. Yeah, like
yep.
he can be a mesh runner.
Yep, mesh would be the perfect scenario for him. You talked about him as a returner. We're not the type of guy that's going to sit back there and dance around and not get yards. He's going to get upfield. And like I said, he shows the toughness in the run blocking game. He's going to show it in the return game as well, that he's going to, run through contact. He's not going to just, stop and try to avoid every tackle. He's going to destroy those pursuit angles and just outrun guys. So stature and speed is similar to Jalen and Tyreek, but I think that in terms of not the same quickness, but I really like what he does. I mean, as crazy as it sounds for a receiver his size, I like what he does in the run game compared to some of the other receivers that we have. So it's an opportunity to add that aspect while not losing the speed that we have with the other guys and the different types of timing concepts that we run with them.
Yeah, I think he's a little bit undervalued right now because Florida was one of those programs that has been underwhelming the last couple of seasons. He did do well up against SEC type of competition with those head bobs, the fakes, changing up his tempo in his routes. Like that's something we're used to seeing from Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. But the thing is, Coach, that we're so spoiled with elite receivers in Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. We take a look at the other players. You're like, it's good, but it's not like Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle. So it's like is it really a good apples to apples type of comparison? I mean, those two are just elite at what they do compared to Deke.
That's fair.
Certainly. I mean, a guy like DK, I think, especially in a Mike McDaniel system, where, as you mentioned, he's a guy that does struggle a little bit with the press, but if you can get him those free releases manufactured with the motions, I think he's a guy that would be another just extremely fast weapon for this offense. And we will be taking this home within the next 4 minutes. But I do just want to go lightning round, 1 minute, 20 seconds or 30 seconds each on Armand Membu, because the athleticism is too good to pass up. I have in my notes watching him, Pro Bowl tackle, all pro guard. That is my note on Armand Membu. I think he could be I think he could be a good tackle. I think he could be a tremendous guard with the traits that he has, the athleticism, the ability to be that guy that's that 6'4", 330 plus pound monster, but still be able to move in space. That's just my read on Membu. Is I think he's long-term guard, and I think he's a really good guard at the next level.
I think, it really depends on where he goes. Some teams will just straight up pigeonhole him into guard. I don't know if Miami will draft Armand Membu, and I think if they do draft him at number 13, I think that says that you may not believe in the ability of Austin Jackson to stay healthy, because Membu has played along most positions along the offensive line, but he's best at being a right tackle. I do think he'll do well at guard, but his body, his play style screams to me that he will be a above average to great right tackle. Depending on guard, I don't know how his skill set from Missouri will translate into this type of offensive scheme. I think this is more so a coach question. He may have more knowledge on that, but I think he'll be a good to great right tackle. Guard, maybe a Pro Bowl guard, but how that transition will go, I'm not so confident that I can exactly say, yeah, like he's going to be an all-pro guard. He's going to be a stud. I just can't say that for sure.
Yeah, so I am lower on Membu than a lot of guys seem to be for the Dolphins. I still like Membu a lot. But my thing for Membu, the first game that I watched for him was the Alabama game, and that game has kind of haunted me with him for a while. And I have watched more, obviously, and he's grown on me a little bit more, but I just can't put him in that elite category personally. I do think that, he's got – for me, I like him better as a guard than a tackle. I think he certainly can play tackle in the NFL. But I think that when we're talking about Dolphin-specific stuff, I don't see any way that they pick a player at 13 that they expect to come in and play guard from day one. And for that reason, I don't think that he's really in the picture for the Dolphins, and I certainly don't expect him to be sitting around on the board at 48.
Well, thank you guys for watching. It has been a lot of fun. We are going right to the finish line here. Hussam, say the thing.
As always, folks, go Fins.